Okay, we're recording. We're live. We're live. Okay. Um.
Okay.
So, um, you know what? This is for people that don't know
Okay.
you. I know you pretty good. So let's introduce yourself
I'm Barbara Ann Bell Tyler McGinley.
first. Who are you? So, and you were born 1946.
October 8th, 1946.
Okay. Um, you're beautiful. You don't look like you're in your 70s. You don't act like you're in your 70s.
I try not to.
And I'm really excited to do this project with you because you inspired me to do what I'm doing every day, you know. And also with knowing what you have your degree in this field and also have a passion for helping people is really important. So I'm excited about introducing you to my class.
Oh, good.
So I'm going to go through and we're just going to ask questions and it'll be easy. Okay?
All right.
So I like to do things backwards. I think I always want to know establish the story, right? So why don't we talk about what's going on now? So are you happy with your life today?
I'd say pretty much. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why?
Um, well, I don't have any. It's settled.
Settled?
My life is settled, and I get to do the things I enjoy doing.
Right.
What was hard about a career and a working life is just having to get up every morning and having
Mm-hmm.
to um, perform or to answer to others. Um, so when you retire and you get to just
Do
do
what
all,
you want.
yeah,
Yeah.
you report to yourself, you make your own decisions, you set your own deadlines, timelines. You get, the freedom is just wonderful.
I know
I
you
think
stay up late and sleep in late.
everybody should look forward to getting
Yeah.
older. It shouldn't be
Yeah. Well, it's a privilege denied many. A lot of people don't
true,
make it.
true, true.
So it is. I mean, it's a blessing. Okay. So let's now we're gonna fast forward. We're gonna go backwards and talk about a little bit about where you came from. So we're kind of establishing your childhood. We were talking about what is one of your favorite childhood memories, but you had a lot of fun things in your life being in the army, being with your dad in the army.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was your childhood like?
Um, it was a lot of changes, a lot of moves. I don't even know what my earliest memory is, but I know that I can remember being in New Mexico in the Albuquerque area and making little sandstone dishes out of sandstone. I'd make little toy
Oh,
dishes.
how fun.
And I remember being in Kansas after that when my sister Deborah was born and being, I think I was in Brownies, and I remember my good friend Betsy and walking home from school and seeing the hollyhocks, making
Yeah.
hollyhock dolls.
How cool.
Um,
So you've
and
always been creative your whole life.
yeah, I guess so. Yeah,
You're always piecing
yeah.
things together.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of those things that I really admire about you is your creativity, and especially this last several years with your quilting. Not only has it given you a social life, which is huge and important, but you've gotten so good at it. You blue ribbons and everything. And boy,
Well,
yes,
yeah, I
I think you're good.
well, I agree. I think that if you're going to do something and you want to improve, you have to work on it incrementally and keep practicing, keep trying. And I can see I ran across my very first quilt that I made in 2014, and I can see how much better I am now.
Yeah.
So, and that feels really good.
Well, you put in a lot of time and effort and go to classes and get involved with people. Keeps you very busy.
Yes.
Okay, so tell me a time you got in trouble when you were a kid. Were you ever a turkey?
Let me think. Well, in high school, I oh, this was a big one. I was there was an assembly,
Okay.
and I was talking to my friends, like O'Reilly, and I
We
got
got it from
called
you.
out, and it was a day that unfortunately there were going down
Okay.
on at the military base. So I had to stay after school. I missed my school bus. The high school was in downtown Fairbanks. It was a
So
long
you were living
ways.
in Alaska during this
Yes,
time.
I was living in Alaska,
Okay.
and my brother, who was 2 years older, because I had to stay after school. He stayed with me,
Okay.
and so we had no way of getting home because the buses had left.
Okay.
We had to walk. It was probably freezing or much colder.
Oh man. Yeah.
And I had worn, of course, because I was going to be on the bus, I'd worn a short skirt and nylons and flats. But he walked with me all the way home, and we'd stop in different businesses and
Yeah.
warm up. But we couldn't get through to our parents because all the communications with the post were shut down because they were having
Okay.
maneuvers.
Wow.
And when we got home, boy, was my mom mad
Well, she was
at
probably
the
worried. Oh
school.
yeah, she was probably
She
worried
was
sick.
mad that they had done that and had not been more considerate about helping us to get home
Right.
and letting us walk home in the cold like that.
Right.
You
I
know,
mean, that was horrible.
frostbite was very, we were lucky we weren't totally frostbitten.
So your older brother was Teddy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So that's really awesome that he stood up for you.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were 2 years apart, and we were close.
So that goes into like so. Tell me about your. I know you know. Tell us about your parents and your siblings. You have yeah. You have a rich
Uh,
family.
yeah, my mom and dad each came from a family with 10 children.
Okay.
They met they were from two small towns very close together in South Dakota. And my dad was a farm boy. My mother's father was a depot agent.
That's cool.
And I had, so my mom lived in the depot. They had a house, and my grandfather was the depot agent. Um, my dad had lost his father when my dad was 16, and the
Now, what
grand
was the situation with that? That was one of those things when I was doing my genogram that there was that thought that he might have committed suicide.
we don't know,
Okay.
but yeah, he was just 40 years old when his dad. I mean, his dad was 40. My dad was 16, and my grandmother was left with several
Wow.
of the 10 children, and
Yeah.
it was right at the end of the Depression. It was about 1939, so she was taking care of all these children alone on a farm,
Wow.
and it was she was a very very strong, rugged woman, and she had had polio in her childhood, and had lost pretty much the use of her right hand.
Yeah. That's and she kept going.
But she could also swat with that right hand.
Yeah, I bet she did. I bet she had to keep
She
those kids
had
in
to.
line,
She had to. Yeah,
especially with my grandpa. I know
they
he
were
was a
a
turkey.
they were a wild bunch. They really were.
So now you so they got married, and you tell me about your siblings. So what is your
Oh, well, Teddy was the oldest, and he's 2 years older than I am. Then there's me, and then after that, we were like three separate families because it was my brother and I. And then when I was about 5 or 6, my next sister was born.
right?
That was Charlene, and that was in Augusta, Georgia, that she was born. And then
We think she was the milkman's child. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I love my Aunt Char. Don't tell her that. Oh.
she was an RH factor baby and had to have a
Okay.
total transfusion when she was born. But then the next baby was my sister Deborah, and she was I was about 9 or 10 when she was born. And then my youngest sibling, my brother Stephen, is only 3 months older than my son.
I know that's crazy. I can't imagine being
So
pregnant at
we
the
had
same time as you.
three separate
Yeah.
really groups of kids.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love my aunts and uncles. You know. Yeah, some of them like Aunt Deb, you know, obviously. Um. Okay, so you know, let's ask you some of the things that like how did you marry your partner in our life? Um, you know, you married two partners. So how did you meet
Mm-hmm.
my dad? And how did
Um,
How did I get born?
Well, I was um, in 19. I graduated high school in '64. I went to Colorado State University
Mm-hmm.
in Fort Collins for about a year, and in '65, my dad retired. They were in Colorado Springs. They moved to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho,
Yeah,
and
same
took
thing.
at that time, the two youngest siblings with them. My brother and I stayed in Colorado. Teddy was going to the University of Colorado part time and working. And so when the parents moved, I needed someplace to go. And I went to Boulder, and Teddy and I had a small apartment at the
Yeah.
Harvest House um, together. And I needed a job, so I ended up applying for a job at the Applewood Pit.
Tyler's Applewood Pit?
Tyler's
Was it
Applewood Pit.
Gaylord or Tyler's?
It was Tyler's Applewood
Tyler's Applewood Pit. Uh-huh.
and that's how I met your dad. He was a cook, and I became a waitress, and we just had such fun. He had
Yeah.
a great sense of humor. He was just super smart, and I always liked a man who was
Really smart.
really
Yeah.
smart
My
and
dad
had a
is
sense
smart.
of humor. Those were two real important things
Yeah.
for me.
I'm pretty glad you picked him out. I wouldn't be me without him. So, um, so kind of like it says, tell me one of your favorite memories from when you were raised in your family. But your family changed. So, I don't know if it can like because of the divorce, it was you and I were a family for a long time.
So, yeah, your father and I were together for about 15 years. It was a
Right.
restaurant family, and that means hard work.
Right, all the time. It's the lifestyle.
It was that, like, when we had the Village Coffee Shop, we started that in 1971, and
Mm.
it's still in existence to this day.
I know it's
But
awesome.
when we started it, it was it was open 6 days a week, so that meant we worked 6 days a week, and on Sundays when it was closed, we would go down and clean.
Right.
In all those years, we only had one family vacation. We
I
made it
remember it.
to Disneyland.
Yeah, that was awesome.
So we were kind of a workaholic family,
Yeah.
and it made things, I think, more difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then I know that it talks about your work life. Um, so your work life changed, obviously, when you divorced my dad. You had gone
Actually,
to
it
college.
changed before that because I started in college.
Mm-hmm.
I had dropped out from Colorado State University, and then
Right.
I had the opportunity when you were, let me see, I graduated in '75. You were
I was born 1974.
right, and so I had an opportunity. There was a special program for women returning to college, and I got
Cool.
into that program, and I started women's studies, and I got to be a full-time student. I ended up being in the business school and got a business degree from the University of Colorado.
Yeah.
So it was kind of hard being working in the restaurant,
Trying to
raising
keep up with
children,
college. And some of your kids were harder than
college.
others. They drew on the wall
My son was ADHD,
and. Right.
very very hyper, and there were no ways of helping that at that time. There was nothing in the school district, and I had to do reading from the library and learn about what dyslexia was, what uh, he had issues that were kinesthetic. I was able to find a tutor who had been a member of the Orton Dyslexia Society
Okay.
to help him. There goes a bunny
Oh, but
rabbit. And and it was really, and we did about 6 months of physical therapy
mm-hmm.
through the Seventh Day Adventist hospital and system, and that really made a huge difference for
Okay.
him. And then at the end of that 6 months, he said, "Mom, I don't need this anymore."
Oh, that's
He was
awesome.
retested, and he still continued to have difficulties, throughout.
Which is
School.
weird for me because like I always think of him as the good kid, the one that added together, the smart
Oh,
kid.
it was very hard kid. He was really tough. I mean, in some
I
ways
felt
it
like
was.
I was the tough
Yeah, well,
kid. Is it both two tough kids?
I had two tough
Yeah.
little ones. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, kind of backtracking a little bit, I'm going off script a little bit. I do want to point out, since this is for a psychology class, that so you were talking about Teddy. And Teddy, go ahead and tell them what happened when Teddy was.
When he was in his early 20s, when we were living together at that apartment at the Harvest House, he became more and more bizarre, and he was difficult to live with. And it turned out that he was paranoid schizophrenic, and so I was like
How did that? How did?
19. I was like 19 or 20, and so he was in his early
Okay.
20s, and you know it. Uh, it's difficult to say how it manifested. Um, he was talking to himself.
Right.
He began to see things. It was auditory and visual
Mm-hmm.
hallucinations, and
I imagine it was kind of scary for you to witness that. I mean, I don't know.
yeah, somewhat. I ended up. Um, Maybe that's part of the reason why I connected with your father.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. It could have been a contributing factor to.
Well, I know that all you talked about Teddy being your protector, and then now you have a brother that's not the same. That must have been a big loss for you.
It was a big loss for us. It's a living
Yeah.
death because then we continued after I married your father. We were in Boulder for many years, and Teddy was also in Boulder,
Mm-hmm.
but he was living a life where, for example, he would live in his VW van with
Right.
his several cats. Um, I kept trying to help him. Uh, the Boulder mental health system was excellent.
Mm-hmm.
He ended up having a counselor who followed him for years,
That's awesome.
helped him somewhat gain independence, finally get into an apartment with his cat, Sweetheart. And he,
I
even
know he
though
was
he
married for a minute. I know I have that there's a Theodora out there that he had a child that was up for adoption somewhere.
possibly, yeah, we think so. My
Okay.
sister Deb ended up going to the wedding with, oh, I can't think of the woman that he married, her name, but she was also schizophrenic.
Right.
But, um,
I remember that.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I mean that's something that a dynamic that's interesting. And then you got married to my dad, and here you ended up pregnant with my brother. And how old were you? You got pregnant with Mikey.
Well, well, he wasn't planned, but it was during the Vietnam
Okay.
War era, and your father was going to University of Colorado. He was planning on being a statistician, but they wanted him to take a poetry class. Well, your father
He probably rhymed right. I can
was not
imagine.
about to take, so he ended up dropping out of school, which meant that he was eligible for the draft. The only thing keeping him from going to Vietnam
Was my brother?
was
Oh.
being in college, and when he dropped out, he became eligible for the
Oh.
draft. So, although we weren't really trying, we were pretty fortunate because we learned that Michael was going to be born,
Okay.
and so that he was able to get a deferred draft status.
Okay.
So Michael kept his dad from having to go
Oh, that's
to
good.
Vietnam.
I mean, like,
We called
yeah.
him Michael 3A Tyler.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, if my dad went to Vietnam, who knows if I would have been there. So the difference between me and Michael is 7 years. But I find it interesting. I'm kind of backtracking a little bit that your and mom ended up pregnant at the same time you were, and so she was a little bit. She got pregnant before you because Steven's older, my uncle
Right,
Steven.
3 months.
And so, what was that like for you? Because I know you ended up having to go and help her. She was older. Her pregnancy
Um,
was not as easy.
right. While I was pregnant with Michael, it turned out that my dad was working not in Idaho where they were living, but he was working over in Montana because that's where he was able to find work. So she was at home with my
Mm-hmm.
two sisters, and um, she developed phlebitis, in which one of her legs became very swelled up, and she had to go to the hospital. And so I was called to go up there and help,
Right.
and I helped get her into the military hospital over in Spokane at Fairchild Air Force Base, and stayed with her and helped my sisters. And I don't think my dad even I don't know that he even made it home during that time.
Where was
But
he?
he was also drinking at that time.
So was he? Where was he? An active military at that point. Like,
Oh no, he had retired at 65.
okay.
This was 19. 7.
So with just so that the class knows, Grandpa was in World War II, and he was 101st Airborne. So there was
Well,
a.
if you want to know a little bit about his military record, I should probably have a glass of water. That's
We
okay.
could take a break. I mean, in between
Um,
if you want.
no, I can do this. He had gone into World War II in 1943. He went into 101st Airborne, and he was a remarkable marksman because, being a farm boy, he could shoot a pheasant through the eye with a bullet, where most people would shoot pheasant with a shotgun.
Right.
Everybody wanted his pheasants because there was not buckshot; they
Oh,
were
that's
nice and
cool.
clean. So that ability to shoot served him well during World War II.
Thank God. Otherwise, life.
And yeah,
That was
so
good.
he landed at Normandy on D-Day early in the morning at St. Mary Glaze. He was one of the first uh, paratroopers to go in very early on D-Day. He ended up um, being at Bastogne,
Okay.
which was a very major battle, and he was also at Market Garden. He jumped into that. At
Mm-hmm.
Bastogne, his 101st, I think, went by truck through, because he used to
Yeah.
describe on a map all these towns that they
Wow.
went through on the way there. But it was very, very cold, of course, and many years later, he still had cold feet because I think his feet had been frostbitten because
Oh
they
man.
didn't have the protective gear for soldiers.
That they have today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I just think that's amazing. I mean, like as when I was younger, it didn't matter as much, but as I get older and I watch the movies and I read about it, I'm just like, gosh, my grandpa was a rock star. You know?
But he also had PTSD because some
Right.
of the things that he saw, he was one of the first people to go into Eagle's Nest, which was Hitler's, um, basically his hideout, where he went
Wow.
to. He also, the 101st, they went into and helped liberate one of the concentration
So he
camps.
saw. Oh yeah.
One time, he and his best friend were in a haystack, and his best friend was bayoneted, and he had to be quiet while that
I
happened.
can't even imagine. I can't even
So,
imagine that.
you can imagine the
Yes.
kinds of things he saw.
And the things he did, I'm sure
Yeah.
before, I'm sure he shot some people too, and
Oh, of course, of
yeah,
course, of
killing somebody, and even in wartime is still,
Yeah, there was
impactful.
a lot of trauma during, and there was nothing afterwards to help these guys. I mean, they just went home and went back into what would have been normal, in
Quote
quotes,
unquote, yeah, normal life.
lives. And he didn't have any other skills because he wasn't a high school graduate or anything. He didn't have
I
other
got a lot of my being a turkey from him.
a lot of the
Yeah.
skills, and he was at least second or third generation alcoholic,
Okay.
and and the PTSD. It was very difficult for him. He would go in and out of the military service and try things in civilian jobs,
Okay.
and so he had a variety of jobs throughout his life. But in the end, he ended up putting in a total of 20 years of retirement from the army.
I mean, I love my grandpa. He was he tried to make me eat fish eyes once. That's all I love. Um, so
He had a sense of humor. He really did.
um, so of course, we're talking about early life. I mean, realistically, there's so much. Your life has been so rich and in so many different ways. It's hard to to do everything and try to do this in 15 minutes. So there was a period of time that you were a single mom. So I'm gonna,
Mm-hmm.
talking about like.
Right, when your father and I split up, and I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it was because of the difficulty of being a workaholic kind of
Right.
family.
Right.
Because
Well, it's the 70s too. There was a. I
and,
mean, it was.
and I
Yeah.
had gotten involved in these women's lib classes at the University of
Right.
Colorado, and what I've always found interesting was that as a magazine reader, a lot of the women's magazines were promoting this sort of thing,
Right.
and a friend, Nancy, was also telling me how great it was to be single,
Oh yeah.
and pushing me towards
Yeah. which Nancy ended up being my dad's future wife. They got married years later.
Right, and I really think that she was trying to, she did take my place, and I was young and naive, and I kind of went along with that and ended up trying to be single. But even though I had a business degree from the University of Colorado, there were not, at that time, in the early 70s, um, real opportunities in the Denver market.
Right.
There was what they called rolling regional recessions
Okay.
throughout the country, and at that time Denver was in one.
Okay.
There was mining and agriculture, and all the potential markets were down. Plus, businesses like IBM were not going to hire an unusual student like me, an adult grad,
Right.
in my mid 20s. I wasn't one of their, I didn't fit their profile, and so I kind of had to go out there and make it on my own. And I'd always
Yeah.
lived. I'd never lived on my own really. I went from being in the army, family moving together, to being in this really wonderful family in the restaurant business. We had a very good,
Well, my
strong family.
grandparents were also
Yeah,
there.
they were. My mother-in-law was wonderful. My father-in-law was wonderful. And so I had to go out and discover and recreate my world, and I didn't have the tools to do that.
Well, no, and coming out of like your own trauma, there was things that you had, that happened in your childhood, and the change because you have your master's in social work, right? Like you
Well, I
kind of
got
like
that later. Of course, I didn't
later,
get that until after we kind of bombed out in Colorado
right?
because that was in the early '80s that we went out on our own. It was 1981, and
And you had me and my dad ended up with custody of my brother,
right.
so we ended up. I know we went to
I had
Oklahoma
the
for a year.
opportunity because there was no job market really in the Denver area. I took a job in Tulsa, Oklahoma, with the Southern Satellite Systems. They helped put um, the Turner Broadcasting System on cable, developed all these wonderful
And you worked for
cable
It
things.
Subscription Television. I remember that
It
one.
was an attempt, a marketing attempt at cable wasn't in existence yet.
Right, it was brand new.
And so we were in a rural area where we were trying to send out subscription television over the air with
Okay.
UHF
Okay.
antenna systems. And so but Southern Satellite Systems was that kind of an experimental company. It was really, I liked the thought of being part of the new world of telecommunications because I could see
You see what was going to
I could
happen.
see what was going to happen if with improved communications. Of course, there was no internet; didn't happen until
Right.
1994. But we were all involved in this precursor about this exciting new world of making this sort of thing
Yeah,
happen.
that's
So
cool.
I liked being a part of that world. Um, but still, the pay and all of that for women was way below men.
But also like as a single mom and trying to juggle having a child, while doing a job that required you to travel, that required you to go above and beyond because of the fact that you were a woman. And sales, which you had to be on point all the time, looking good, dressing good, saying the right
That
things.
came a little later when I went back to Denver and worked for some other cable television related companies, and then I tried to do cable television electronics sales,
Right.
which I really wasn't, you know, I wasn't an engineer, and I tried to go in and be
Oh right, you
into
fake it until you make
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Baffle them with bullshit.
But there were so few opportunities for women that you were given the worst territories and the worst,
Oh
So it was kind of like being a
yeah,
token. I was a token woman in that company.
yeah.
So
And here
you know
you
how
are,
it
like
goes.
on your own with me, and I know that you didn't use welfare. Know about it. You
I
got
did not
really
know.
low child support. 'Cause my dad
My
was
two sisters had both at times been on welfare, and had you know, commodities and food stamps. Even my neighbor had that, but for
Mhm.
some reason, I never learned about these things, and um, I ended up having to get a hysterectomy in 19. It was actually May 26th.
Was it really today?
May
We're
26th,
at made. Wow, that's insane.
1986, I think, when I had my hysterectomy, and then after that, because of the hormones and all, I went into severe depression,
I remember
and I
that's
lost everything. I lost
that was
everything.
really hard
I
for
could
both of
not
us.
work. I could not communicate. I wore sweats all the time, and we lost the townhouse because I couldn't work. And I knew of none of these things, options that were available to a single mom.
Yeah, there
It
wasn't
was
the same
just,
resources then that there are today.
I, 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 I tried, I did get resources through the unemployment office and through some church related types of things, but really I kind of had to figure it out on my own.
So now, and I know during this time, is when I started drinking. So you had a child who was struggling with school, had some abuse in her own life and addiction at the same time that you're
Right,
going through this.
right.
You find out your
And
daughter's
because
been
I wasn't
drinking bacon in the booze
able
cabinet.
to be present for her or for myself, um, some bad things happened.
Right. I did.
And it was it was extremely difficult for both of us.
It was. We.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was really hard, and we, you know, be having a, you know, you were a mom with a child who has been an addict basically since I was 9. That didn't do well in school, who fought you, who was mean to you. I battled you. I did things like stay out all night and not tell you where I was going. I got arrested for shoplifting, tried suicide. I would bang my head against the wall because I was angry. You had a really, you had a really tough time. You had a, but the cool thing is like, so now one of the questions that they're asking is what was the most impactful turning point in your life? And I think that was something in there.
I think it was that time when I lost my mental health, when I lost everything that I owned, and because there was this terrible market in the Denver area, and I one of the things I'd learned through the unemployment office was how to get temp jobs.
Right.
So I would work temps, and um, one of my friends from Al-Anon, because I was doing Al-Anon at that time, and
Right.
adult children of alcoholics. I got into those 12-step programs. Moved to California, Jeannie,
Right.
and so she was doing well in California. She said, "Come out here, things are better."
Right.
So
And you went out there
then,
on your own because I was living with my dad at the time,
right,
and I was living with my dad because I had attempted suicide, or wanted to, and I ended up in a hospital. So I was in middle school. I was about 8th grade.
hmm,
Okay. And so
yeah,
uh, then I lived with dad for a little while, and it was right before I was going into high school. And then you got me back for high school. And then I really gave you a run for your money.
yes, and California,
Yeah.
yeah, and you went to Redondo High School, and
I was
we
enrolled.
well we had an interesting times. Like I can remember one time. This was before I got my job with the California League of Savings, which was a good job with good benefits, and I was still doing temps. Do you remember the place we stayed out with the fellow who
Oh yeah, I had the
we
dresser for
rented
years.
a
Oh,
room in his house,
oh
and
yeah, I
he
remember.
had the wall, which was his wall of fame,
Right.
and he had been a boxer, and he had trophies and
That's
things
cool.
on all those things
Yeah.
on that wall. But we stayed with him, but we had all his basic. We had a room,
We shared it.
and we shared in a mattress, and whatever we had in that room, that was it.
Yeah.
And the interesting cars I had at that time.
Yeah, we had the ones I would have you drop me off up the street because I was.
Christine.
Yeah, well, there was Mom, the thing was falling out. Like there was duct tape. I'm like, Mom, drop me off 2 blocks from school. I got this. Oh, it was so funny. Oh, I was, and I was so embarrassed over everything, and
That's
I
the
just gave
age
you a hard
to be
time.
embarrassed. But then
I
we
was
would
so
try
cool.
we would try to do things like, do you remember the wet seal?
Yeah.
Do you remember sometimes we'd go and be able to get. I don't know how I came up with money to go,
Right.
but sometimes we'd be able to get you cool clothes. We got you the prom gown.
Right, that was a big deal. I wore the same prom twice. I looked because I went to two different places. Once in Colorado, once there.
But we tried. We
We did.
tried.
Well,
You
I
know.
got my first job away from the restaurant. I grew up in the restaurant as well. With my when I was with my dad. But my first job was working at Bristol Farms and cutting cheese.
Yes.
And I got so constipated. I remember Grandpa, because I could sample cheese. It was really I like cheese, and I would talk to my grandpa on the phone, Grandpa Bruce, and he
Right.
said, "Sassafras, don't you know cheese is binding?"
That was
Oh my god.
Manhattan Beach. That was Manhattan.
Yeah, but I had some money, and
Bristol
I
Farms
know
was.
that I went to White Seal and I bought a pair of shorts, and I had, it's one of those things like I held on to those shorts for a long time.
They meant
Well, I
a
know that the part of the reason I have a hard time letting go of things is because we didn't have things, right? And so I'm so afraid of losing things or being bad. I don't know. Maybe that's letting go of
lot.
the things. Um, so
Losses are hard.
there and
Losses are hard for us. And in that period of time, though, somehow I don't know, I ended up deciding to go to grad school, which
it was
pretty close.
after it was after Dad came to get me. So it got so bad that I was using methamphetamines, and that I would not come home for days. So you didn't know where I was at.
And I said, "Come get her."
Yeah, and so you stopped me. And I mean, as a child that was struggling with addiction, I remember pushing the limit, thinking, "Is anybody going to stop me? Is anybody going to stop me?" So some of the loving things, the most loving things you've ever done, is stop me. Say, and have Dad come get me and say I can't deal with her. And then you also got me into treatment when I was 19 and did an intervention. You stopped me.
Well, you were
So
younger than that because you still were on my insurance, and you were only going to be on my insurance until you
I was
were
19.
18 going on it.
Oh,
You were
well, it was
just.
October. It was October. No, I was 19. Wasn't I?
I don't know. We got you.
1983. Anyway, we can look back. I got married Jeffrey in
Yeah.
1995. Coleman was born in 1997. So I thought it was 1993. Anyway, that's math. That's too much math for me right now. um. That was the you know that was definitely one of the hardest decisions you ever made was to have my dad come get me
Right.
because I was your baby
Yes. Yes.
and you still loved me even though I was a pain in the ass or that I was struggling
Well,
and you didn't know what to do with me. It's hard.
yeah. I didn't have. I didn't have. I couldn't. I just couldn't. Yeah. I
I
didn't.
know I was horrible. I was really really rotten. And I was mean. I was angry. And so we ended up not living near each other for the next 7 years. So fast forward, I was with dad. But during that time, I think is when you really found your soul.
I got involved in a Science of Mind church
Mm-hmm.
and Unity Church, and there was a wonderful minister, um, um, Frank, and I don't remember his last name, but he was amazing, and I got again more into Al-Anon,
Yeah.
and
So we need how to take care of you.
right, and then I got into school and ended up getting my
So that
master's.
was huge. I was looking at the pictures and the accomplishment of getting your master's degree and the smile on your face after you did it. And I wasn't there, so I did. I took it. I've taken it for granted. Like I'm now that I'm in school, getting my behavioral health degree, which I was never going to be like you and be a counselor. Well, I was going to be a businesswoman, but
The therapy crap.
therapy crap. I hated it. I hated it.
Yeah.
I was so angry. I had all of it. I mean, but now, having my own issues, I might being a college student, I can look back and think, wow, my mom got her master's in social work. How cool! And then to go out and do a job that is not easy. It's not easy to be a social worker.
I know. But I loved it. When out in that area, my very first job was with the Harbor Regional Center and working with children 0 to 3 to get them
Oh
into,
wow!
with disabilities into um, the developmental disability system. And I would like to, but I had met Joe, my second
Right. So
husband,
you
at
met.
this
You
time.
did. We go back to how did you meet your partner? You
Yeah,
had.
and basically it was through at that time the personal
You
ads.
end up found him in the paper.
I
Something
was
that out.
trying to put my own ad in because my friend Rosemary and I were carpooling to
Right.
work on our masters, and she was dating and doing all these cool things. And I said, Rosemary, how do you do that? And she told me about I am using these personal ads, and so I decided I would put one in, but I couldn't because you had charged up too much on an 800 number, and I
Oh my
had to
gosh, I
pay
did that.
that off.
I thought, oh, was that? But I did that with Joy. Was it still there, or did I do it again?
I don't know, but there was they wouldn't let me
Jeez,
keep my ad in
that's horrible.
until this, you know, 800 number thing
I
was
remember
paid
doing it
off.
with Joy, so it
So
must have been from
then
that.
I decided, well, then let me see which men have ads, and I found Joe's
Uh
ad
huh.
in the Manhattan Weekly newspaper, and it said handsome single dad enjoys movies and walks on the beach. So I called him,
Okay.
and that's how we got together.
Yeah.
But if I had put in my own ad, I might not have ever.
Met him.
So it worked out.
Well, and, Joe has been such a blessing to both of our lives. Um, one of the things before you were married was that he encouraged you to get me into treatment and do an intervention.
Yes, he did.
So
He saved
without
your life.
him, he helps. Joe helps in my
Said
life.
yes, go to Colorado because your dad and your
Yeah,
stepmom were out
they were
there,
on a vacation,
and
and they didn't believe in treatment or therapy crap
and
either.
your grandpa called me and told me, you know,
He told you? He called you?
I think grandpa called me.
Wow. So he noticed something different in me.
Well, didn't he? Weren't you in the hospital?
No, after you put me in the hospital when I got
I
there.
put you in the hospital.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I went to the hospital before I went into the inpatient
We had to get you detoxed,
Right.
and your grandpa had to help me do that, get you into the hospital,
Right.
and
My grandpa was amazing. I'm so blessed that I have, as a person that suffers with, has suffered from addiction and the stigma that goes with that. The one thing I've really been reflecting on most recently is how supportive and how lucky I am that I've had parents that never made me feel like I was bad because I
unconditional love.
unconditional love and
Unconditional love
words.
is
You've
so
always
important.
believed in me, even as,
Absolutely,
I mean, no
absolutely.
matter how bad I what I blew up. You're like, okay, that's fun. You help me put up a rough tent, my friend.
Well, it's like
You go along with all
when
my
you were a
stuff.
little bitty, little year and a half. You had the playroom and you drew on all the walls and made all these wonderful faces, and I couldn't paint over them. They were so cool. I had to leave them. I mean, you were a unique child. You had so much creativity, even in preschool. Bart
Right.
said that you were not a child that was going to go do these other typical things. You wanted to be involved in drama and role play and the artistic things.
Yeah.
Even it was apparent right from the beginning that you had these talents.
I really liked. I mean, I love drama and I love people. I'm always been a people person. Um, and I'm really grateful for that. Because that was good for both of ours. Um, so I guess I'll finish this off because there's a lot of things, layers of things we could go through. I'm going to add that. How long have you been married to Joe?
Since June 19th,
1999 or
1999.
because I was pregnant with my daughter,
Yes.
and you lived in Las Vegas, so we didn't live close to each other for a very long time.
Right.
You moved to Washington to be closer to your
When
grandbabies,
we retired, when Joe and I retired in the early 2000s, we moved up here to be next to you and to the grandkids.
and I think that I know that for me, a lot of the healing came with what a wonderful grandmother you are and how involved you've been in all the children's lives, including Joshua and Josiah, who you didn't hurt my blood children. You've treated them the same. You've showed up to sports events and volunteered at their school, and left her in the garage for. No, I'm just kidding. That was. um,
I have been involved with North Thurston schools as a volunteer since for I think it's at least 20 years. Because
so I couldn't do this.
Riley was in kindergarten when I was with Mrs. Kirkbride
Right.
and volunteered in her classroom. So that's
When you're the one person that I can call that will come and pick them up or find a way or and even in these last several years when I relapsed and I was struggling and I lost my house, you gave me a home and watched me go through struggles in my own relationship and supported me through it, knowing you couldn't make me do anything I wasn't going to do. And having a child that was suffering, I mean, like, it's really hard to see your child suffer with addiction and not know
mm-hmm.
what to do.
feel helpless, you really that you want to know what helpless is. That's helpless.
Yeah. And you just gotta stand by.
Well, like I said, I told Becky when Becky was having some problems with her daughter a couple weeks ago, and we spoke, and I said, Becky, just picture her in God's good hands. And I had to do that many times. Just picture, there she
Yeah.
is, like
Yeah.
those praying hands. But,
I definitely have been,
this,
Liam. God is definitely. I should be dead 100 times over. I'm everything I've done, and then the places and dangers I put
yeah.
myself into. I know. Well, in the so it's cool now to see like I'm in school. I'm single for the first time in my life at 50. I didn't do it as young, so I would. Starting over, and it's been hard. It's been really hard. You've helped me financially while I'm trying to get on my feet and finish school, and you've watched my mental health, how hard it's been for me to deal with my PTSD and stuff, and be a mom to a child just like me. Revenge. Um, but what I love about where we are, like the advice that you would give me for finishing school. First of all, I kind of know, like you're the reason that you've encouraged me to keep going even when I wanted to quit. There's days I can't get out of bed, and it's been really hard the last 3 years. And it's been really hard. I lost my dad. Um,
A relationship.
yeah, and my identity as what I wanted to be. I wanted a home and I wanted a family, and I lost my family, which has been really hard. And having to go back and forth, like go to football and watch, and have that comparison constantly, like I was not good enough. But to still fight for my recovery.
And look where you are today.
Yeah, hopefully. Still sitting in the same mountain. No, still unemployed. But where I'm at today is that the love that you've given me, the love my dad gave me, the love that my grandpa gave me, the people that are my family, the love that my aunt Deb gave me she took me in at 19 when I couldn't go back to live with you or dad, or because I would have kept doing drugs.
You
She
couldn't
took
come
me.
back to
I couldn't go back to
Sandbox.
either one.
You couldn't go back.
And then when I thought I had no place to go, she took me in, and I remember coming home and coming to her home and being accepted unconditionally. She didn't ever say, "Oh no, you're." She didn't talk about the drugs. She didn't make me feel like I was anything other than her niece. She just loved me where I was at. Today, one of the things that I do, and the reason that I want to work with adolescents specifically, is that um, people like Aunt Deb, the people that showed up for me when I was young and gave me a house and gave me a place and made me feel okay. I want my door to be open to those adolescents as well, because I think that positive words and acceptance and love, ultimately at the end of the day, uh, is healing, and it's empowering. And words can destroy as well. When we carry those words from people that tell us we're not good enough, or that beat us down, or you know take away our identity because of
And then you
whatever.
have to say, when those people try to do that, you have to say, I cast that back into the sea of nothingness from whence it came, because it doesn't mean anything when it comes from the wrong place and the wrong source.
No, it doesn't. Well, the other thing too is that I used to hate. That anyway. Oh my god, Mom. What they think of me is none of my business. It doesn't
Absolutely.
matter. Go ahead and think whatever you want.
Right.
But it's I don't do it perfectly. But I really am blessed for because I also watch a lot of people that have the disease of addiction who don't have the kind of love that I receive. And I love that the love of our family is not just healed you and me, but it's also gone to your siblings
Well,
and nieces and nephews and
the experience of having a paranoid schizophrenic brother, and
yeah,
even at the end of his life, when um, he was had COPD, and he had pneumonia, and he was. But our family still gathered around him. Mom was there. I think
I
both
love that he
Charlene and
he
Deb.
he was he was an angel of God, right? What was he? What was his? He believed he was an angel of God or a messenger of God.
Yes, he believed, but said um, he said it boiled down to three words: love God more.
I love that. Love God more. I want to tattoo that on my forehead.
He said that that's everything all about, and he was this underneath this genius. I
Oh
mean, he
yeah.
was, and he And he was the kind of person that schizophrenics are. He would give you the shirt off his back. He was always letting people take advantage of
Yeah.
him because he would give and give and give. But at the end of his life, when these other the people said that typically most schizophrenics have lost everything. They've burned all their bridges, and
Oh,
nobody is there for them.
how sad.
And so here at the end of his life, he had his family there still supporting him. And was it 2006 or 2008 that he passed away? But um,
I think it was 2000. It was about the same time that my dad was having heart surgery. I think we ended up flying around in around at the same time, and that was 2006. I think.
I think it was six.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think 2008 was probably Grandpa Bruce passed away. Could have been. In fact, older than too.
So
But yeah.
no, the one thing that I love about our family is that there's minor drama, but it's minor drama. Like there really isn't a whole lot of drama. There's a lot of love and support. And we have my uncle Stephen ended up being gay, which also shook up the. He got married to a man, which shocked Grandma and everyone else because we didn't know. Um,
Having a transgender grandchild,
right.
that's been, it's, but people are going to be and do develop. I mean, everybody I always said was like a treasure chest.
Oh, I
That was
love
part
that.
of that Carnegie thing,
Right.
that everybody's kind of like a treasure chest, and you just have, nobody is not a treasure chest. You
Right? You
just
just
have
an
to,
adventure. You never know what you're
you
gonna pull out of
just
there.
have to kind of see what their gifts are that they have to give.
And that's really. I love that because for this assignment is for a positive psychology class, and the power of believing in somebody, giving them space, valuing what they have, no matter who they are.
And supporting them, and,
Yeah.
and helping them to see what their gifts are. Because,
Right.
I even, I love that when I, have different people, I always try to find, what is your treasure? What is your gift?
Oh, that's awesome. I love that visual.
And
Yeah.
it's so
Everybody just
cool.
tells me, I spend 45 minutes. Me, I take after Grandpa Patsy. And there's no place that I don't want to make a
And
friend.
my mom's dad was like that too. He never met a stranger.
Right.
That's part of our family. Kindness is part of our family. Caring is part of our family. These are all the values.
Yeah.
And
And I had that from my dad, my dad's family as well.
kindness,
Kindness, kindness.
yeah.
Yeah, like